My name is Evelyn Marsh. I've worked as an executive assistant at Hollingsworth and Crane, a mid-sized consulting firm in upstate New York, for over a decade. I've never missed a deadline, never taken a sick day unless absolutely necessary, and I've kept secrets no one else dared to hold. I was the one who knew when board meetings were coming up before they were even scheduled, who made sure the coffee was brewed to the CEO's exact liking, and who stayed late when the office lights had long gone dark. I did it all not because I was asked, but because I took pride in it. I believed, somewhere deep inside, that loyalty still mattered in this world, that if you proved yourself useful long enough, people would value you, not just for what you did, but for who you were. My boss, Richard Crane, was a man people either feared or admired, usually both. He had the kind of sharp jaw and whiter-than-white smile you only see in political ads. He talked with confidence, but behind closed doors, he snapped like a bear trap. Ruthless, calculated, charming when he wanted to be. But I saw the cracks. I knew the tone he used when his voice dropped just low enough to scare, but not quite loud enough to accuse. I'd been in rooms with him where others had left crying, but not me. Not until that Thursday morning in April. It started like any other day. I brought in his Americano with 1 sugar, no cream. He barely looked up from his screen as I placed it on his desk. That didn't surprise me. He'd been curt lately, more than usual, but I chalked it up to stress. The firm was merging with a larger one in Albany, and tensions were high. I had offered several times to take on more tasks to ease the burden, but he waved me off. Then came the all-staff meeting. Standing in the main conference room, with over 30 people packed inside, Richard took the floor. He spoke of the upcoming merger, praised a few team leaders for their exceptional performance, and then, with a small laugh, said the words I'll never forget. And of course, Evelyn here has been with us 10 years now. Our most loyal assistant. A glorified paper pusher, really, but we all need one of those, don't we? Laughter, nervous, scattered, mine included. But inside, something shattered. He didn't even glance at me after saying it. Just moved on, as though I were a piece of furniture in the room. 10 years. 10 years of dedication, silence, and swallowing my own ambitions. And I was just an assistant, a paper pusher. I smiled. I smiled the way women have smiled for centuries when they're humiliated and told to get over it. But what I did next, no one saw coming. After the meeting, I returned to my desk, sat down quietly, and began sorting emails. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was somewhere else, replaying the moment over and over, like a cruel home movie. The laughter, the casual tone in his voice, the way he didn't even make eye contact after the insult. I was invisible again, but not for long. Richard had taught me something important over the years, though he didn't know it. Working for a man like him meant learning the rhythm of his power. When he struck, how he hid things, how he manipulated people just enough to keep them guessing. I watched him push a young analyst into a panic attack over a late report. I watched him quietly phase out a single mother from the accounting team by increasing her hours without a word. He always left no evidence, no proof, just enough plausible deniability to keep HR off his back. And I kept the files, I kept the notes. Every name, every date, every suspicious change in behavior I witnessed from others. I never meant to use them. At the time, it just felt like something a responsible assistant should do. Now it felt like ammunition. That afternoon, I went to the break room. It was unusually quiet. Only Karen from HR sat by the microwave, stirring a sad little bowl of soup. She'd been at the company even longer than me, 30 years, and somehow always overlooked, always forgotten. I poured myself tea and sat across from her, pretending to scroll through emails. After a moment, I said, Did you hear what he said in the meeting? Karen nodded. I did. I'm sorry. I looked up. Her eyes were full of something that surprised me. Not just sympathy, but recognition. A quiet knowing, like she'd seen too much and couldn't say it. You know, he used to call me Karen the complaint sponge behind my back, she said softly. Said I was only good for absorbing everyone else's whining. I found out through an intern. I swallowed. Why didn't you ever say anything? Karen shrugged. To who? HR doesn't investigate HR. And besides, everyone just says, that's Richard. As if that makes it acceptable. We sat in silence for a moment. I stared at her, wondering how many more like us there were. Women talked in whispers in this building. Stories passed around like secrets in high school hallways, always vague, always brushed off. And I had been part of that culture, hadn't I? Keeping my head down, doing the work, hoping good behavior would be enough. Not anymore. That evening, when everyone had gone home, I stayed late, like I always did. But this time, I wasn't answering emails. I opened my locked drawer, pulled out a flash drive, and began copying files. Notes I had taken over the years. Calendar entries Richard had asked me to clean up before auditors arrived. Correspondence that hinted at discrepancies in project billing. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with them, but I knew this much. I wasn't going to keep cleaning up his messes. Not now. Not after what he did. He may have called me just an assistant, but I was the assistant who knew everything. It had been a week since the staff meeting, and Richard was back to his usual self. Smug, commanding, oblivious. He walked through the office like a man who believed he was untouchable. And maybe, up until now, he had been. I, on the other hand, had become invisible again, but this time by choice. I spoke only when necessary, listened more than I used to, and kept my head low while quietly documenting everything. My flash drive was growing heavier with secrets. Each night I stayed late. Payroll discrepancies, duplicate invoices, memos he asked me to send, only to later deny he'd ever authorized them. It was strange how easy it was. When people don't think you matter, they don't bother hiding things from you. I'd been the silent observer for years. Now I realized I was also the perfect witness. One afternoon, I stopped by the printer and bumped into Naomi, a junior analyst in her late 20s, sharp as a tack, but always quiet, withdrawn. I used to think she was just shy. Now I looked a little closer. She flinched when I touched her arm accidentally. Sorry, I said gently. No, she muttered. It's fine. There was a pause, and then, before she turned to leave, she said, He told me I talk too slow. Said it makes me sound stupid in front of clients. So now I don't talk unless I have to. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't need to. She walked away quickly, hugging a file folder to her chest like it was a shield. I stood there, stunned. How many had he broken like this? Quietly, efficiently, while keeping his polished reputation intact. That night, I opened a blank document and started a list. Not just of infractions or dates, but people, names, their roles. What I remembered, they endured. I wasn't sure what I was building yet, but it felt like the beginning of something serious, something that could shake more than just Richard. 2 nights later, I knocked on Karen's office door after hours. She looked up, surprised. I want to ask you something, I said. Off the record? She nodded slowly. If I had documents, emails, records, things that prove Richard has been mistreating staff, maybe even doing things that violate compliance, who would I take that to? Internally, I mean. Karen sighed, pushing her glasses up. Evelyn, internally, nowhere. You'd be handing over a loaded weapon to a firing squad that already knows how to aim. You need to go higher, outside the company, legal, media, or both. It was the first time she said it out loud, that this wasn't just office politics. This was something real, something ugly, something worth exposing. I nodded. I left her office with my heart racing. For years, I believed that keeping your head down and doing your job well would protect you. Now I saw the truth. Silence doesn't protect, it enables. The next morning, Richard strolled in late, as usual. He handed me his coffee cup, empty, and didn't say thank you, just like every other day. But this time, I didn't refill it. I stood, calmly walked to my desk, and pulled out the folder I had printed the night before. 50 pages, not the whole file, just enough to get someone's attention. I slid it into a plain envelope and sealed it. My hands didn't even shake. The envelope sat in my handbag for 2 full days. Every time I touched it, I felt its weight like a stone pressing against my side. But this wasn't fear. It was responsibility. I wasn't rushing. I was calculating. On the third morning, I arrived early. Earlier than Richard, earlier than most. I stopped by the front desk, smiled at Cynthia the receptionist, and placed the envelope into a small padded mailer addressed to a name I'd written carefully. Elizabeth Drayton, Senior Investigative Correspondent, Albany Business Journal. I didn't know her personally, but I'd read her pieces, long-form exposés on unethical boardroom conduct and corporate abuse. She wasn't flashy, she was thorough, and she got things done. It felt like lighting a fuse. The next few days passed in slow motion. Richard continued to act as if the world revolved around him, snapping at junior staff, rolling his eyes in meetings, talking over women. I watched it all with eerie calm. I no longer reacted. I observed. Naomi, meanwhile, had grown even quieter. I caught her crying in the restroom once, not loudly, just silent tears, wiping them away before anyone could see. I hesitated before speaking, but finally asked, "Naomi, did something happen?" She looked at me, startled. "Nothing," she said. "I just had a bad presentation." But her hands shook. I made a note to keep an eye on her. Friday afternoon, I received a message in my personal email. Subject: RE, submission, corporate misconduct, Hollingsworth and Crane. From Elizabeth Drayton Evelyn. I received your documents. I've begun a preliminary review. I have questions. Several, in fact. Can you meet? Discreetly, next week. Your name will remain confidential. ED. My throat tightened. She had read them. She took them seriously. This wasn't just a dream anymore. This was real. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking like a pulse, and slowly typed back. Yes? I'll come to you. Just say when and where. We met at a bookstore cafe in Albany, 2 towns away. Elizabeth Drayton looked exactly like the kind of woman Richard Crane would underestimate. Modest cardigan, soft voice, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for coming," she said, extending her hand. "I should thank you," I replied, gripping her fingers firmly. We sat in a quiet corner. I'd taken the day off, told the office I had a doctor's appointment. For once, it wasn't a lie. I needed this meeting like oxygen. Elizabeth opened a worn leather notebook. "Your documentation is thorough." I'll be honest, I receive dozens of tips a month. Most are vague or emotional. Yours is different. You have structure, evidence, names, dates. I nodded. I didn't realize I was building a case until he humiliated me in front of the whole office. Then everything clicked. She leaned in slightly. "You've got enough here to get people fired, possibly worse. But you need corroboration. I need other voices, people willing to speak, even anonymously." "I'm working on that," I said. "There's a girl, Naomi. I think something's happened, but she's scared. Karen in HR knows more than she lets on. And there's at least one other name in the finance department. I'm almost sure of it." Elizabeth scribbled quickly. Start small, conversations, signals of safety. You don't have to tell them everything. Just give them a reason to believe you're not alone. If even one person comes forward, the others may follow. We talked for nearly an hour. She gave me a burner phone and an encrypted app to use if I uncovered anything new. Before I left, she looked me square in the eye and said, "You're braver than most people I meet. But be careful. Men like Richard Crane don't go down quietly." That stuck with me the whole drive home. The following Monday, back at the office, I noticed Richard was irritable. More than usual, something had rattled him. He snapped at everyone, even Dan from sales, his golden boy. He barked at Naomi during a meeting for not having updated charts. She apologized, her voice barely audible. When she returned to her desk, I followed. "Naomi," I said gently, "he has no right to talk to you like that." She looked at me with wide, panicked eyes. "Please, don't. I just want to do my job." "You don't deserve this," I said. She lowered her gaze. Then, after a moment of silence, she whispered, "He asked me to stay late last month. Said he needed help prepping a report." My heart stopped. She swallowed. "He didn't touch me." But he closed the door, locked it, then stood too close, asked questions that didn't feel like questions. I made an excuse and left. But since then, he's been watching me. Rage boiled inside me, but I kept my voice steady. "Thank you for telling me." Naomi looked away. "Please don't say anything yet." I nodded. But inside I knew. The time for silence was almost over. After Naomi's confession, I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Not from fear, from fury. But I had to be careful. If I pushed too hard, I could lose her. And if she backed out, Richard would keep winning. The next morning, I brought in 2 cups of coffee. I handed one to Naomi and sat beside her quietly. "I'm not asking you to do anything," I said. "But if you ever want someone with you, if you decide to tell your story, I'll be right there." She gave a small, grateful nod. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That day, Richard called a spontaneous department meeting. We all filed into the glass conference room. He stood at the head of the table with the same smug grin, though his eyes darted around more than usual. "I've noticed a strange energy in the office lately," he began. "A lot of whispers, low productivity, a sense that people are distracted." He looked directly at me when he said it. My pulse stayed steady. "This company runs on discipline and focus," he continued. "We're weeks away from finalizing the merger. Anyone not pulling their weight will be addressed. Personally," I didn't blink. Let him watch me. Let him feel the walls closing in without knowing why. After the meeting, I walked to Karen's office. I closed the door behind me. "I need a favor," I said, "and I need you to trust me." Karen's face tightened. "I've been waiting for this." I explained the meeting with the journalist, Naomi's story, the mounting file of evidence. She didn't hesitate. "I have something," she said, opening a drawer and pulling out a small leather-bound notebook. "I've kept notes for years. Incidents, names, staff turnover, times he interfered in reviews or raises. I kept thinking I'd use it someday if I ever left." She handed it to me. "Maybe now's the time." I accepted it with both hands. You just became my second voice. That night, I scanned every page of Karen's notebook. Dates matched mine. Incidents overlapped. We weren't just building a story. We were building a pattern. I messaged Elizabeth through the secure app and attached the files. Another voice. HR.she replied instantly. "This changes everything. I'll start drafting a story, but I need one person to go on record. Even just initials. You?" I stared at the screen. I had always been behind the scenes, quiet, safe. That was what made me invisible and powerful. But power means nothing if you're not willing to use it. I typed, "Use my name." By Wednesday, I knew the article was coming. Elizabeth hadn't said the exact day, but her final message was clear. "We're nearly there. It's solid. You've done more than enough. I'll notify you 12 hours before it goes live." I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling. Not fear. Not exactly. It was closer to grief. I thought about everything I had poured into this job for 10 years. The birthdays I missed. The times I skipped dinner with friends because Richard needed a report proofread. The evenings I watched him drink scotch behind closed doors while I ran his calendar and answered his wife's texts. I thought about how, for a long time, I believed being dependable would be enough to protect me. And then I thought about Naomi, and Karen, and the intern who left after only 3 weeks without giving a reason. Richard had taken something from all of us: dignity, voice, safety. Not anymore. That afternoon, Richard asked to see me privately. He rarely called me into his office now. The moment I stepped in, I saw the shift in his eyes. That same faux charm he used on clients, but laced now with suspicion. "Close the door," he said. I obeyed. Calm. Unshaken. "I've noticed a change in your demeanor lately," he said, sitting down, fingers steepled. "You're distant, less efficient, distracted." I wasn't aware my work had slipped. He gave a clipped smile. "It hasn't. That's what makes it so interesting." He let the silence stretch. "Listen, Evelyn," he said finally. "We've worked together a long time. I trust you. Which is why I need to ask. Are you aware of anything unusual going on? Rumors? People stirring the pot?" I met his eyes. "I've heard whispers, but I always assumed you didn't pay attention to those." He didn't blink. "And what if I said some people here have been working against the company? Damaging its reputation?" I held his gaze. "Then I'd say maybe the company damaged them first." His jaw tightened, just slightly. Then he leaned back in his chair, chuckling softly, but there was no humor in it. "I hope you're not aligning yourself with the wrong people, Evelyn. It would be a shame. You've been here a long time." "I have," I said, "and I've seen everything." The words landed like a stone between us. I stood. "Is that all?" He nodded once. As I reached the door, he added, "Be careful who you trust." I turned, just enough to meet his eyes one last time. "You too." That night, at 9:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Elizabeth, tomorrow, noon, online and print. Brace yourself." I sat on the edge of my bed and exhaled. It was coming. There was no turning back now. I arrived early the next morning, before the sun had fully risen. The office was silent. My footsteps echoed louder than usual. I sat at my desk, fingers trembling slightly over the keyboard, knowing that in just a few hours, nothing would be the same. At 11:58 a.m., I stepped away from my desk and walked into the bathroom. I didn't want to be at my screen when it hit. I needed a moment, a breath. 12:01 p.m. When I returned, the air had changed. No one said anything, but you could feel it, the electricity in the room. Phones buzzed, emails pinged, monitors lit up with the bright, bold headline from the Albany Business Journal. "Assistant Speaks Out, a decade of harassment and cover-ups at Hollingsworth and Crane." My name was in the second paragraph. Karen's quotes followed mine. Then came excerpts from the documents, timelines, HR interference, the merger's potential collapse, and, delicately but clearly, Naomi's story. The room wasn't silent anymore. It was buzzing like a disturbed hive. Naomi stood at her desk, frozen. I walked over and placed a folded sticky note in her palm. One word was written on it: safe. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Within 30 minutes, Richard emerged from his office like a storm cloud in a suit. His jaw clenched so tightly, I could almost hear his teeth grinding. He looked at me. No more fake smiles. just raw, cornered rage. He didn't speak, just disappeared behind his door and slammed it shut. Less than an hour later, the building security team walked past my desk. They headed straight to the executive wing. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. News spreads fast in offices, but nothing like this. By 1:30 p.m., word had reached our satellite branches. By 2 p.m., clients began calling. By 2:30 p.m., Richard's name was removed from the company website. I stayed quiet. No gloating, no whispers, just calm. At 3:17 p.m., I received a message on the encrypted app from Elizabeth. "You've started something big. We're already hearing from other former employees. It's not just your office. He's done this before. And now, they're talking." That night, I went home and sat in my kitchen, hands around a warm mug of tea, staring out the window. I wasn't celebrating. It wasn't over. But it had begun. Richard had spent 10 years acting like the company belonged to him. Now, the truth did. The next morning, the office looked different. Not physically. The walls, the desks, the old coffee machines still sat where they always had. But something intangible had shifted. The fear was gone. For the first time in years, people spoke openly. Quiet conversations became full-voiced discussions. Naomi smiled. Karen walked taller. Even the junior staff, the ones who'd always avoided eye contact, stopped by my desk to ask if I needed anything. There were rumors, of course, that Richard had been placed on immediate administrative leave, that the board had been blindsided by the article, that the merger was now on indefinite hold. But none of it had been officially confirmed. No email from corporate, no statement, just silence, the kind that means scrambling behind closed doors. By noon, I received an unexpected call. It was Richard's wife. "I'm sorry to reach out," she said, voice low but composed. "I just wanted to say, thank you." I was caught off guard. "I'm sorry?" I knew something was wrong for a long time. I just didn't know how deep it went. I thought I was crazy. But when I read your name in that article, I knew. I didn't know what to say, so I said the only honest thing I could. "You're not crazy, and you're not alone." That night, I met Elizabeth again, this time at a quiet cafe outside the city. She looked tired but satisfied. "We've received 8 more emails," she said. 2 former interns, 1 ex-partner who left the company after a personality conflict, 4 administrative assistants from other branches, and someone from a consulting client in 2019. All of them tell the same story. I sat back, letting it sink in. It wasn't just us. "No," she said, "but it started with you." She handed me a printed copy of the article. It had been picked up by 2 national news outlets. The headline was slightly changed. "The woman who took down the man everyone protected." I shook my head. It wasn't just me. "Maybe not," Elizabeth said, "but you were the first to say, 'Enough.'" On Monday morning, a company-wide memo finally arrived. Richard Crane had been terminated effective immediately, pending external investigations. The board thanked staff for their ongoing commitment to professionalism during a period of transition. I sat at my desk and watched people reading the memo. The collective exhale was almost physical. Then came the email I wasn't expecting, from the CEO of the parent firm. Subject: Your future. He asked to speak privately. I stepped into a quiet office, unsure of what to expect. He was calm. Director: "You could have walked away quietly," he said. "Instead, you stood up. We see value in people like that." I blinked. "I wasn't looking for anything." "Which is why you're exactly who we need." He offered me a new role, not just an assistant, a project lead in internal ethics and compliance, a role created because of what I'd done. I didn't answer right away. I needed time. But as I left his office, I felt something I hadn't in years: power and peace. I took a few days off before giving the CEO my answer, not because I doubted myself, but because I needed space, real space, to feel the weight of what had happened. To sit with the silence and understand it wasn't emptiness. It was something new, a beginning. On my second day away, I walked through the park where I used to eat lunch on hard days, a place where I'd sit with my Tupperware and try to remember who I was outside of work. For a long time, I didn't have an answer. But now, I looked around and realized I remembered. I wasn't just someone who kept the trains running on time. I wasn't a glorified paper pusher. I was the one who saw what others ignored. I carried the truth in silence, and then chose, finally, to speak. When I returned to work, the energy was different. The company hadn't magically transformed overnight, but something was undeniably better. People looked one another in the eye. Meetings didn't feel like performances. Naomi no longer sat at the edge of her seat like she might be called out at any moment. Karen had started scheduling open-door hours. Even Cynthia at reception wore lipstick again, something she'd quietly stopped doing months ago. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fixed, but it was healing. The CEO called me in that afternoon. I told him yes. Yes, I'll take the role, but only if I'm allowed to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. He nodded. That's what we're counting on. The title didn't matter to me. It wasn't about the nameplate. It was about the door, one I was finally holding open for others. I didn't forget Richard. I couldn't. Last I heard, his legal team was scrambling. A few shareholders had called for an independent investigation. There was talk of litigation, but I didn't need to follow every headline. I had made peace with knowing he would never again wield unchecked power under fluorescent lights and forced smiles. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet. You saved me. I couldn't speak, but I saw what you did. I hope someday I'm that brave. N. I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. Naomi didn't owe me anything, but that one note, it reminded me why I did what I did. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because someone had to go first. I was never just an assistant. I was the woman who remembered every name, every tone, every slight, and I used it, not to destroy, but to reveal. Richard once said I was easy to forget. Now, he'll never forget me, and neither will anyone else.